Since the play texts themselves give very little information about what comprised the Moorish or Morisco costume, one has to consult the theatrical wardrobe inventories for the period. These indicate that the conventional costume for the Moor or Morisco consisted of a marlota, a hip-length, loose-fitting jacket, a pair of balons, which is balloon pants, covered over by an alfuba, or ropon, a long, loose-fitting tunic. The jaquetillas, a short jacket, calzones, long, open pants, y jubones blancos, mentioned in the opening stage direction of El Tuzaní, do not appear in the descriptions of Moorish or Morisco costumes. On the contrary, according to Evangelina Rodriguez Cuadros, la jaquetilla, calzones, and calzones for men, and the white jubones for women, were the conventional costume of black Africans. Black Africans who resided in Spain at Calderón's time were for the most part slaves. So, when the Moriscos took to the stage at the beginning of El Tuzaní de la Alpujarra, they wore the conventional a la morisca costumes, altered to suggest that they were of African origin, and that they had the social status, therefore, of slaves. This is borne out in the subsequent dialogue that refers in several places to the Muslim domination of Spain as African, and the Moriscos as Africanos, and also to the Moriscos as suffering slavery, captivity, etc. At first glance, this manipulation of the conventional costume appears to support the notion of sympathetic portrayal of the Moriscos as an oppressed, enslaved ethnic minority. But we must be cautious to avoid anachronism. The Enlightenment, with the mantra of liberté, égalité, fraternité, had not yet happened. The abolition movement had not yet begun, and the notion of cultural relativism wouldn't appear for another 2 centuries. 17th century Europe, and in particular Catholic Spain, was a place of absolute truths, of rigid class distinctions and xenophobia. In Madrid in the 1630s, the appearance of actors in Afro-Morisco costumes served to identify the characters not as an oppressed minority worthy of sympathy, but as foreigners. Moriscos, at the bottom of the social ladder, worthy of disdain and suspicion. So the Moriscos, having preconditioned the audience with their costumes to stand in judgment, begin to speak and act. Cadi, the leader of the group, speaks first and asks, ¿Están cerradas las puertas? And then he proceeds to say, No entre nadie sin la seña, y prosiga si les hambre. Celebremos nuestro día, que es el viernes, a la usanza de nuestra nación, sin que pueda esta gente cristiana entre quien vivimos hoy presos en tanta miseria, calumniar y reprender nuestras ceremonias. The group then proceeds to sing a song that laments the end of the Moorish dominance of Spain, celebrates the conquest, the Moorish conquest of the peninsula in 711, and makes fun of the Españolillo altiva, who was hoodwinked and defeated by Musa, Ibn Said. And every stanza of the song is punctuated by a chorus of Suley Viva, referring, of course, to the law of Allah. Then suddenly the song is interrupted as the group is startled by a loud banging on the door. And Cadi, the leader, concludes that, sin duda, cogernos tratan en nuestras juntas, que como el rey por edictos manda que se velen, la justicia, viendo entrar en esta casa hoy tantos moriscos, viene siguiéndonos. Cadi orders everyone to hide their instruments and to tell whoever is at the door that they just happened to drop by. One of the moriscos compliments Cadi on his deception, saying, muy bien lo tratas. Cadi then says, pues todos disimulemos, and orders Alpujarra to open the door. Alpujarra resists, fearing being beaten by the authorities, but finally complies, and in walks Don Juan Molec, an elderly Morisco and member of the City Council of Granada. Allow me to summarize. The Moriscos had gathered secretly to engage in a Morisco celebration, a fambra, that Cadi points out as in direct violation of the edict of the king. They sing a song that glorifies the Islamic conquest of the peninsula, makes fun of all the Christians, and is punctuated with a shout of "Long live the law of Allah." Then, when the knock comes at the door, the group hides the evidence of their crime and together agrees to lie about why they're at Cadi's house. If we place the context The text in its context of the 1630s, we can see that the opening scene about Tuzaní did not serve to generate sympathy for the moriscos. On the contrary, the moriscos are shown here to be unassimilatable, duplicitous, false Christians who rebel against Catholicism and the king, and their foreigners. In other words, this portrayal of the moriscos reaffirmed old Christian perceptions that justified, in the end, the expulsion. Now let's move to what happens when Apuscus opens the door and Don Juan Malek enters the scene. Don Juan Malek is a largely assimilated, elderly Morisco of Moorish noble blood, and a member of the Granada City Council. Malek tells the Moriscos, who feared he had come to chastise them, that he has come from the city council chambers where he's witnessed the official proclamation of Philip II's prohibition. He then narrates how he criticized the edict and got into an argument with Don Juan de Mendoza over the question of the equality or inequality of Moorish and Old Christian noble bloodlines. Critics have cited the altercation between Malek and Mendoza as indicating Calderón's sympathy for the Moriscos, because he is perceived as portraying the Moriscos with dignity and the Old Christians as arrogant, abusive, and intransigent. Let's take a look at the altercation. Don Juan Malek, having narrated his objection to Philip II's legislation, relates how he challenged Don Juan de Mendoza, also a council member, who he describes as a deudo de la ilustre casa del gran marqués de Mondejar. Don Juan de Mendoza suggests that Malek is defending the Moriscos because he is one, and that he's trying to forestall the punishment of the people, the Moriscos, who are gente vil, humilde y baja. Malek quickly passes over, interestingly, the question of whether they're downtrodden, humbled, or impoverished. He admits this is true, but says that the current condition of the Moriscos is just a product of fortune's capricious nature. He then zeroes in quickly on the question of the status of Moriscos of noble Moorish blood. He tries to argue that baptism into the Christian faith makes the Morisco nobility equal to the old Christian nobility. Don Juan de Mendoza disagrees very succinctly, saying simply that a Moorish king is still a Moor. Don Juan Malek then relates how the debate degenerated into an argument and admits that he probably went too far and said something that provoked the younger Mendoza into hitting him with his own staff, thus offending his honor. The elder Morisco, who is too old to avenge the offense himself and has no son to stand in for him, insists to the Moriscos who are present that because he suffered this offense in defense of their honor, the honor of all Moriscos, they should take up arms and avenge the insult and assert their dignity as a people. Malek gives his impassioned call to arms, and the Moriscos enthusiastically agree and secretly plan a rebellion, which doesn't happen in Calderón's day for another 3 years. Later in this scene, a small delegation arrives at Don Juan Malek's house to suggest that his aggravio may be dealt with peacefully through a marriage between Don Juan Malek's daughter, Doña Clara, and Don Juan de Mendoza. Malek agrees to the marriage. But then, curiously, in an aside, he says, quote, "Quiero usar aqueste medio mientras se empieza el motín." In other words, while publicly agreeing to a peaceful solution, Don Juan Malek will continue to plan the rebellion in secret. Now then, does this scene indicate sympathy for the Moriscos on Calderón's part? Does it portray old Christians as arrogant, abusive, intransigent, as a number of critics have claimed? Well, let's consider the portrayal of the old Christian, Don Juan de Mendoza. First, it is not presumptuous or arrogant for Don Juan de Mendoza to conclude that Don Juan Malek is defending the Moriscos because he